Hello and welcome to the Aftershock. We have a full crew tonight. Robert Jonas, Alex Morgan, Jamon Moore, and I'm Phil Leyva, and we're here after a 3-2 loss. The San Jose Earthquakes lose to their arch rivals, Los Angeles Galaxy. Difficult match for the boys. Jamon, I'm going to kick it over to you first. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts right after the match?
Excited to get to join in person. Obviously, I am less of a lucky charm at a home game than I am on a road
Send
game.
them back to Seattle.
The Quakes lose tonight, and it felt to me there was about 20 good minutes of soccer in the end of the first half, and the rest of it, whatever good soccer existed, was because it was ceded to them by the Galaxy having a lead. The defense in the second half particularly was just poor. In the first half, ceded too much ground, and then the pitch was a bit wet tonight. I don't know if you guys caught it, but there was a lot of sliding tonight. Jonah Mensah slips, wasn't really in a good defensive position. They go down a goal early after probably giving up 90% possession early in the game. Only 16 completed passes in the first 15 minutes of the game. That's just a rough way to start, and it kind of portended the way the rest of the evening would go. Sans that couple moments of magic that they got, in the middle of the first half.
Couple moments of magic, Alex. What do you think? There were a lot of gaps in the middle of the pitch for the Quakes that allowed the LA Galaxy to come through and create opportunities. They pressed at times, but I think at least two of the goals tonight, the Galaxy capitalized on those moments where the Quakes didn't have as much pressure on the players. So what do you think? Do you agree with Jamon here that there's some good moments for the Quakes, but overall a bad defensive output for them?
I mean, Jamon says it was 20 good minutes of soccer. He might be a little there. They scored 2 goals in the space of what, 90 seconds in the first half. And other than that, they were struggling to break the Galaxy down. They had a decent stretch at the end of the first half where they were pushing the tempo, where they were getting balls in behind. But it felt like creative force in the midfield. And that felt like the story of tonight. The focus of tonight was just that they got overran in the midfield and they lost the midfield battle. They let Ricky Pooch control and dominate this game. They let the Galaxy play those combinations through the middle. And in the end of the second half, the Quakes really had trouble closing down space in the midfield, collapsing the defense. And that was why the Galaxy were able to score those 2 quick goals at the beginning of the first half.
Yeah, second half. And Robert, just kind of your reflections on the match here. Quakes do get a couple of goals, but they concede enough to walk away with 0 points at home.
It's interesting. Alex uses the word conceded the midfield. They lost the battle in the midfield. You kind of have to have players in the midfield to lose that battle. I mean, they definitely just vacated the midfield at times. When that ball got out onto the wing, the Quakes would overload, the Galaxy would overload, and you had a couple of Quakes entirely on the other side of the field, maybe waiting for the miracle cross-field pass, but it didn't seem like anyone was checking back to the ball from the side or even from the forward line enough to take advantage of some of the space that they could actually have had if anyone had been there to take it. So I did think this game was entertaining. I will say that off the top. It was there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of great opportunities. I would say just entertaining soccer. Galaxy is going to walk away with 3 points and be very happy about it.
I want to put on that a little bit, Robert, because the Quakes play in a 4-2-3-1, 4-4-2. They're not battle in the midfield. They know that the Galaxy is going to step in and is going to try to control the midfield space and is going to have the majority of possession, and that's fine. And when the Quakes did the best, it's not because they got a bunch of numbers in the midfield and tried to play it slowly through the midfield in the way that the Galaxy did. It's when they were able to play directly, to play into Jeremy Ebobisi's feet and get a layoff. When Jamir Montero was able to get a layoff to Jackson Ewell, and then they were able to go long. That was when the Quakes looked good in the first half, but they weren't able to do that enough. It felt like they kind of got caught in between in a lot of times. They didn't know whether they were going to launch or whether they were going to hold. They didn't know in this phase of the game, are we supposed to press or are we supposed to stay in a defensive block?
But I do want to see the Quakes take advantage of that space when they can have it. I mean, Greg Manny spoke this week about the Quakes being a wing-focused team. He knew that they were going to have to defend those wings strongly, and they did. And the Quakes didn't make enough of adjustment or sort of test that center when it was available to them to see if they could outdo the Galaxy in terms of the way they were playing them back. And that's, I think, where they had their opportunities.
I was thinking about that a lot during the match, Robert, because one of the instances in which we saw the Quakes capitalize offensively is when they were a little more lateral at the very front of the formation. So we saw Cade Cowell with a lot of movement in the first half and actually catching the LA Galaxy center backs off guard. But we didn't continue to see that throughout the match. And in the opportunities in which Cade Cowell actually could score, where he didn't capitalize on those opportunities. I think he had 4 shots that were actually not on target going into the second half right before he got subbed out. So, Jamon, kicking it back over to you, just talking about the offensive output here. Cade Cowell, we got to see Matthew Hoppe for a bit. We got to see Ayo Akinola. There are a lot of offensive options that Luchi went with. What stood out to you in the match?
Yeah, the part that stood out to me was a bit of a time in the second half where it looked like the offense was starting to click. And again, I want to couch that by saying that the Galaxy are at that point have the lead and they're ceding a bit of the possession to the Quakes. So it's not necessarily the Quakes necessarily took the bull by the horns, but there was a couple situations transition and a lot of the connections started to look pretty good. And for instance, the Cowell pass that was just a little bit off, or a Bobasi open in the box for a potential header, but the cross sails just a little bit over his head. Like there were a lot of opportunities that they looked better than they had in the last couple of games, but it's a home game. It's a Cali Clasico.
Yeah.
If you can't get up for a game like this, then what are you doing, right? And so at this point, are they in danger of falling out of the playoffs? Not yet. A couple wins, a draw or two will get them into the playoffs at this point. But losing these 3 points tonight and giving them to a team below them in the table and now having to go and face Minnesota, that makes that Minnesota game feel, with several games to go, like a must-win.
Absolutely.
And let's be honest, they haven't really shown up for any of the California Clasico games this season. They lost 2-1 earlier in the season. They tied 2-2 at Stanford, and they lost this one 3-2. They 3 games against the Galaxy this season, and they've come out with 0 wins. And I think that's disappointing for this team, and especially if the Western Conference is getting credit. And this one did actually remind me a lot of that game at Stanford Stadium, where the Galaxy came out on top, where they scored an early goal, and where the Quakes were struggling. And I think the difference between that game and this game was Jack Skane, because in that game, Jack Skane came on in the second half and he pushed the tempo. He got that second goal and he was leading the Quakes line. He was winning the ball high up the field, and he was putting the Galaxy on the back foot. The Quakes didn't really have a guy like Jack Skane in there. Montero has not been the guy who's going to push the tempo there. He had a great assist tonight, and he finds beautiful passes, but he's not shown himself to be the number 10 who is going to shuttle the ball, going to push high up the field, press the back line, and lead this offense.
We did get to see a little bit of that from Nico Shakiris tonight, and Nico's very young, right? And we need to give him the time to be able to grow. It was disappointing he started off the year with an injury, because he did look good in preseason when we saw him against the Red Bulls, and Luchi commented how good of a preseason he had, and he was excited about the playing time he expected Nico to get, and it just hasn't really come together for that. But I think tonight was his best showing we'd seen in some time. He did kind of look more like the 10. He did kind of push the issue around the box. He did play a bit progressively into the situations. Matthew Hoppe with a kind of a hard touch, cuts it back, doesn't get off a shot, but that comes from Nico Shakiris pass. And so there were situations where you saw that glimmer of what you want to see from Nico Shakiris. Unfortunately, not enough. And you're right, missing Jack Skane, and we got a bit of news, I think, on Jack Skane. Missing Jack Skane tonight was a huge difference, because there was nobody helping to kind of boss that midfield when they needed it, because he's got that pace to be able to keep up with players like Ricky Puig. But you don't quite have that without him in there. And when Puig got free, there was nobody that was going to be able to stop him. He went 40 yards down the middle of the pitch and scored what looked like to be a pretty simple goal, pretty professional goal on his part. And, that's just a situation that you can't get outnumbered in that and get caught forward and allow a player like that to get in behind. But if you do, you have to have a player in a position to track back. Montero was walking. Montero did not see that as a situation that he needed to track back on, and it was a huge problem.
Well, I want to push back on that a little bit because I don't think it was just Montero. I think at that point in the game, Guerreiro and Yule were also tired and being asked to do way too much. And I really think that, you know, Luchi Gonzalez could have made earlier substitutions in this game because at this point of the season, the Quakes have depth. They have Shakiris off the bench. They have Matthew Hoppe. They have Io Akinola. They have Benji Gacanovic. They have a lot of guys off the bench who can make this team better. And he didn't use them really until the 75th minute, well after the Galaxy had already mounted their comeback. And I think if I'm Luchi Gonzalez looking back on that, I think I'd regret that decision a little.
You know what's
I'm going to work with Danae a bit and step out so we can get the press conference going here.
Sounds great. Excellent. You know, I want to talk a little bit more about Jamon Montero. I know we've kind of hit on this quite a bit, but one of the things that I noticed about Montero is when he gets the ball, when he receives the ball in the attacking position, rather than darting forward, as we often see with Jack Skane and filling that pocket that's right in front of the center backs, we often see him pause and try to distribute to the wings. And sometimes we'll find a ball forward to Jeremy Abobasi or whoever's playing in the forward position. And I just feel like tonight, Jamon Montero was trying to marshal that part of the field. He was trying to get things going and create things. But Alex, I think you kind of hinted at some of the issue here. And I actually saw Colin Etnier post about this in the Slack.
There was an extensive back and forth between our two wonderful contributors, Asher Cohn and Colin Etnier.
And I think a lot of it is like the identity of the team. Like what kind of a team is this exactly? What are they trying to be? Is this a counter-attacking team? Is this a team that is building through the middle, which obviously we haven't seen a whole lot of? Is it a team that is going to be stretching the back line? I think there are a lot of questions around that. And if you watch Jamon Montero's performance tonight, yes, it was, as Colin said, very tidy. However, it wasn't actually creating in the attack and forcing the issue. And I think that's what a lot of the problem was tonight.
Yeah, I think the answer is as simple as Jack Skane is getting a really true natural number 10 in the position. Because Jamon Montero, I don't think his best position is a 10. I think he's an 8, and the Quakes don't play with an 8. I think he's a fantastic player right now who's not being used very well because he should be in the 8 position.
Absolutely.
And I think the Quakes need to be flexible. They need to be a team that can press when they want to and can bunker and counter when they want to. And a guy like Jack Skane in that number 10 position can allow them to do it. But forcing Montero into that role when that's not where he's the most comfortable is where I think you're seeing some of these questions come up about the team's identity and what they're trying to do. Because I don't think Jamon Montero is.
You also have Jackson Yule, and then you have Carlos Grueso occupying those spots in the midfield. Grueso obviously a 6, right? He's playing right in front of the defenders. But, you know, when you're watching the match, when you're kind of viewing what the best possible midfield combination could be, I mean, what do you think that is? Is Luchi going with his best option here? Or is it just a matter of because they don't have Jack Skane as an option? Or what could be better for the squad, you know, if Luchi had the opportunity to go back and try something different?
And Robert has all the answers.
You know, I don't disagree with the starting 3. I do think that the game plan didn't work from the opening whistle. Jamon and I were watching Abobasi fail to get the ball on pass after pass that was sort of sent into his area, and that was coming out of the midfield. And when that failed, there was no plan B, at least not immediately. And the Galaxy just overran them in that first 20 minutes of the game. You know, at that point, you know, if they had a different midfield in there, I'm not sure it changes. I'm not sure he would have actually changed that approach to try to take advantage of Jeremy. So, you know, I would like to see in a situation where, you know, you can give guys some minutes like a Nico. I think he'd be great. I would love to see him get more than just the minutes at the end of the game. In fact, even see him play with the game tied or even with the Quakes ahead and see what kind of contributions he can make. But he's not ready to start this game. Yeah. And I'm really not sure you have anyone else to do so. One thing about Jackson Yule, though, that concerns me a little bit, and maybe this is just the adjustment of the season, or maybe some of it's fatigue. He really started the season strong, trying to break lines, stepping forward, becoming almost a second attacking midfielder at times.
Scoring goals.
And he's really just settled back. You know, he's Carlos's, you know, deputy on the side, one side or the other. You don't see as much of that aggressiveness getting into the attacking third. And I think that's something that, you know, he and maybe the coaching staff need to kind of evaluate and see, you know, what they can do to take more advantage of what Jackson's capable of doing on the ball.
Yeah, you know, I think you're onto something there, Robert. And I'm thinking about the forward position as well. We got to see some substantive minutes from Matthew Hoppe during this match, and he also struggled in similar ways that Jeremy Ebobisse did in trying to find those passes. Now, whether that was a matter of like just technical or skill wise, or just not finding the passes, I think that says something about what's going on with the squad. So speaking of Matthew Hoppe, this is a topic that I wanted to bring up because I have both of you here tonight. We got to see some minutes from Matthew Hoppe. Alex, I'm going to go to you first because you were really excited to see him come into the squad. I know that he's only had a couple of appearances for the Quakes, but what are your thoughts so far in regards to Matthew Hoppe, what you've seen from him, what his potential could be, and what he can provide for the Earthquakes?
I think he had a really solid debut at the weekend where he was getting in good spots, making good decisions, pushing the tempo forward. I don't think that he covered himself in glory tonight. I was hoping that he'd be able to come in and make a bigger impact, but he was, I think, struggling to be decisive and make the right decision. I think he was genuinely getting himself in good positions, but the end product wasn't there. Now, was he any worse than Cade Cowell? No, Cade Cowell struggles with the exact same thing, getting in solid positions, but not necessarily having tight control of the ball or knowing exactly when to release. So I think they honestly were very similar performances tonight, Cade Cowell's performance and Matthew Hoppe. He wasn't able to raise the level like I was hoping. Really, I think the only substitute who was able to raise the level was Nico Shakiris. And that was positive, as Jamon said, because Nico was a guy who struggled a lot at the beginning of this season. He had a big injury at the beginning of the year. He struggled to get his feet under him in his first few appearances. But tonight, he was pushing the ball forward. He had a couple great passes. He had the Travella pass for Rodriguez in the goal that was called offside right at the very end. This was a solid performance from Nico Shakiris. It makes me hopeful that he can raise his game and he can be another guy who can fill that 10 position, because he's very similar to Jack Skanes. So if you can have two guys who can kind of fit that mold, who can trade off in that role, I think that's a good plan for the Quakes moving into the back half of this season.
I wrote down for Hoppe trying too hard, and that note was sort of based on the idea that, you know, I saw him trying to make passes that if this had been his 6th month with the club and the guys around him kind of knew what to expect, those passes might have come off. But tonight they were going right to the galaxy or right into space for someone to steal the ball. It was sort of diffusing any of those promising attacks, especially around midfield. Now, that's something that maybe he's being given a little more permission to play his game, but he still has to develop the chemistry with the players around him to be able to play that game. And so a little bit of cautiousness, I think, would have really helped and maybe kind of taken away a few of those those giveaways. And so I think that's why we definitely didn't see the best of Matthew Hoppe tonight.
I like. Go ahead, finish.
But I just think, that's something that, maybe that's a coach's decision to give him free reign, or maybe he's the kind of player who feels confident enough that, his teammates are going to be able to get on the passes. But a couple weeks of training is probably not enough to develop that kind of style. He's got to play a little more conservatively when he's getting in there.
Yeah, I like that situation where his positioning of where he was when he got that pass from Nico and he was able to have the opportunity to get a shot off, even though it didn't come off, like positioning wise. Like, is he in a good position to be able to do something there, create something there? The answer is yes. What I didn't care for was these moments where he was the guy far outside the box whose job it was to get the ball in the box. And I'm like, wait a second, you got Matthew Hoppe. The reason you got him is because the guy scored goals in the Bundesliga, even for a short period of time. Why is he not in the box? Why is he the one on the outside putting in the crosses? He's a bit bigger, got a bit of size.
Is he?
I
think he definitely was, and there was a couple moments at the end of the match when Matthew Hoppe very effectively used his body to win the ball in the box.
He was trying to box the keeper in on the corners and be able to do some stuff like that.
I like him as a Raumdeuter, kind of at the top of the box, looking for layoffs, looking for ball. I don't know if he's going to be, a guy in there like Ayo Akinola who's going to win headers and take the ball down, but I like him being right in that area.
But he was 30 yards from goal and trying to put in crosses that no one was ready for, or trying to dribble around the top of the box, got double teamed and dispossessed, very Cade Cowell-like. If you want to compare him to Cade Cowell, that happened to him twice. Right? And in fact, led to a breakaway, that the Galaxy then took to the corner and were able to waste off more time. So, was there a moment or two that was good? Yes. Was there more moments that were not as good? Yes, but I could just question how he was being used, and I would have liked to see him closer to goal. Now, I know Io was in there, right? So you already got 2 forwards. So, at some point it's a little too much. But one of the things that happened to the Quake time and time again, I'm getting really tired of it, is when they put players into the box and there's 3-4 guys in the 6 and there's absolutely nobody trailing, nobody on the penalty dot, no one at the top of the 18. The ball squirts out to the front and you're like, well, maybe if someone was there, they would have those opportunities.
It happened once or twice. Jackson Ewell in the first half had a chance like that went just wide. I mean, Jeremy Abobasi's goal
run. I was shocked there was a near post run.
When they do that, they're good. It's deceptively simple.
Yeah, no, let's go back to the Jackson Ewell situation, because that shot that he scuffed, I was like, wow, there was actually a near post run there for a cutback. I was shocked. Like, where has this been all season long? And yeah, he didn't, obviously, for the second time tonight, cover himself in glory in that situation. But, and he was in a good position. And I'd like to see him get in that position more often, or some other trailing
minutes for the Quakes did that well. And I think what they did tonight that I hadn't seen before, but I actually quite liked, was their willingness to dribble past a man and break the lines in midfield. We saw 3 or 4 times Christian Espinosa get the ball in a pocket of space inside and then take a touch past the midfielder. And then that opens up a 2v1 with the forward in the box. And that's how they scored their goal. That's how they were able to push the tempo, get that Jackson Ewell cutback. So I kind of liked Christian Espinosa, tucking inside a little bit in possession. And I think that worked well for about 20 minutes.
Anytime Christian Espinosa comes central, good things tend to happen. And he's on the wing. He's going to put in a lot of hopeful crosses. And he's going to have to, beat 1v1s. And frankly, those get cleared quite easily. I like it better when he gets to the inside.
Here's a thought. Christian Espinosa, number 10, Jamir Montero in the wing. What do you think?
I don't know. We got a lot of Montero.
I think we might see an early red card from Christian if he's in the middle, because he does like to mix it up defensively at times.
Here's the one thing that makes
makes Robert nervous. I can
tell. He's got the ball at the top of the box. He rips 3-4 shots a game. I think you have a decent chance of him putting the ball in the back of the net. When he gets in central positions, he can hit the ball at the top of the box in the way that I don't think any of the other central midfielders at the Quakes right now are willing to do. And I think that makes them significantly more dangerous up the middle.
Look, we're having a good time right now and we want to entertain the fans, but we're finding positives in a game that was very largely a set of negatives. I try to be the person to come on here and go like, hey, look, it's one game. There's plenty of games. Like, they're on pace and things like that. And they're still on pace. It's not, for those who are going, like, this team's going to miss the playoffs. I think it's too early to think anything like that. That's very negative vibes at this point, given the number of games left. That said, I do get some concerns about what happened down the stretch with the Quakes in Almeida's first season, 2019. And some people mentioned in the comments tonight, they were getting Almeida vibes here. Can the Quakes find enough rotation to keep the team fresh down the stretch? I have concerns. If you can't start a Nico Shakiris if Jack Skane is injured, if you can't start a Matthew Hoppe on the wing, if you can't start an Io Akinola up top, if you can't find somewhere for Christian Espinosa to get a rest if he needs it, Jackson Ewell a rest, Montero a rest. Like, if you can't find ways to do that, it's going to be potentially a very nerve-wracking stretch run for Quakes fans.
Well, and there's no secrets either about how this team is playing. Again, speaking about, Greg Vanny knew exactly what he wanted to start this game doing. And his defense, the Galaxy did everything they needed to do to make that first 20 minutes of Quakes play. I mean, it was hard to watch. I mean, for Alex, it was especially hard to watch. And that was something that, if the Quakes are going to be that easy to figure out, they're not playing a 90-minute game anymore. And if they've got to somehow make adjustments, maybe with a different set of players in that starting line, a slight adjustment to the formation, perhaps to catch some teams off guard.
Yeah, when they've switched to two up top and gone to a 3-5-2, when they tried it, it's actually been fairly dangerous, and they've been able to generate good attack time.
Look, I don't think it's worth putting a ton of pressure on this team right now, because if they win 1 or 2 more games, they're in the playoffs. They don't have to worry. They have enough.
I would
they
say
have
it's
enough
at least
runway.
at least two, and three if you want to make sure you get a home game.
They have enough runway in order to be able to achieve that. What I want to see right now is I want to see Luchi Gonzalez experimenting. I want to see him trying things like Espinosa in the middle, trying things like a 3-5-2, trying different looks so that they have different options when they get to that playoff game, because they need to be prepared to do something different in that playoff game, because there's a three sort of leg series in the playoffs now. They can't approach each of those games the same way. I think the 3-leg series is going to totally blow up the way that teams approach these playoff games, because you have to have different, fresh approaches for every game, and that's why I want to see Luchi experiment.
So let me ask a quick follow-up question then, because Luchi did make some wholesale changes near the end of the match with some of the substitutions that he made. I mean, is that, in your eyes, like enough of experiment, as you said, to try things different, to get different players on? Because like Robert had mentioned it before, like Matthew Hoppe is still trying to find passes because he's a new member of the squad. Like that's part of it, right? He's still trying to get a feel for the people around him. It's the same goes for Ayo Akinola. Like, so they are getting minutes. It's coming along. They're just not getting as many minutes, perhaps. As...
That was not experimentation tonight. That was desperation tonight. They were throwing everybody they had on the field because they needed to. They wanted to get the result. That was Daniel coming up for the corner kick at the end of the game. What's experimentation is what they did against Tigres a few weeks ago, where they completely changed the shape and they went with the 3-5-2 and they stuck with it for a solid 45, 30 minutes of soccer. That was experimentation. They need to do it a lot earlier in the game before they get in a hole and have to throw everything forward, or at the start of the game. That's what I'm looking for, not tonight, which is just a desperation attempt to get everybody on the field.
Okay, well, I want to push back on that a little bit, because there were multiple lead changes throughout this match. And earlier in the match, as I mentioned, we did see players coming in and shifting inward and playing through the middle of the pitch. We saw Christian Espinosa do that a bit. As you had mentioned, he was effective. And we did see Cade Cowell do that. And I think the team looked best when both of those wingers were doing that. So we will be moving over to the press conference very soon. But I did want to say that I thought the team was most effective offensively when they switched that up, and in that short period when they had the lead, when they scored those goals, was when the wingers came into the middle of the pitch and occupied that space. Because let's face it, like, it hasn't been happening from the midfield. You mentioned Jackson Yule hasn't been taking those opportunities. We haven't seen Jamiro Montero necessarily do that offensively on his own either. He's always looking for the pass.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that other coaches and other teams describe the Quakes as a wing-heavy team, because they don't really have traditional wingers in like the 4-3-3 model of a winger.
No,
like an opposite, take on a player, beat him on the dribble, get cut back, cut inside. They don't have those kind of wingers. Cade Cowell doesn't do that. His strength is not 1v1s. Christian Espinosa his strength isn't beating players on the dribble. His strength is getting in behind on the counter attack, getting inside, getting in interesting pockets,
and delivering crosses.
And yeah, doing interesting things. So it's they use wingers differently, and it's not just a pure winger system here. But we're going to
thank you everyone for joining tonight's post-game press conference with head coach Luchi Gonzalez. We will start with the first question in Spanish from Maximilio Corrado.
Hi Luchi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, Max.
Bueno, profe, la primera, obviamente derrota dolorosa. Lo primero es saber tu análisis en base no solamente al resultado, sino el funcionamiento del equipo, porque obviamente nuevamente se crearon muchísimas ocasiones de gol. Sobre el final del primer tiempo, el 3-1 estaba prácticamente por caer, y obviamente esas son cosas que luego carecen de sentido cuando se analiza el partido como un todo, ¿no? Pero quiero saber, Luchi, más allá del resultado que duele, en cuanto a autocrítica y las cosas que te gustaron del equipo, sobre todo para mirar hacia adelante.
Sí, la verdad duele mucho. Es el clásico, es un juego personal para nosotros, nuestras familias, los fanáticos, historia entre los clubes. Y perderlo duele mucho, ¿no? Y pido perdón, bueno, a los fanáticos, porque la intención es ganar esta y tomar el juego mucho en personal y con mucho orgullo, pero no dio. Felicidades a ellos. Es un muy buen equipo con buenos piezas en el medio campo, un jugador con push te puede cambiar el juego en cualquier momento y lo hizo de nuevo esta noche. Y desafortunadamente no pudimos cerrarlo en la manera completamente como queríamos en 90 minutos. Pero sí, mira, creamos oportunidades de goles para el 3-1 antes de la mitad. Tratamos de reorganizarnos defensivamente para el segundo tiempo y no rendimos. Al final empujamos el juego, tratamos de empatarlo. Yo tengo un grupo que tengo fe, si la empatamos la podemos ganar, pero no se dio. Lástima a los 10 minutos en el segundo tiempo, cómo empezamos el segundo tiempo. El partido se perdió en los 10 minutos en el segundo tiempo, donde no estábamos organizados defensivamente como lo habíamos hecho mejor antes del primer tiempo terminar y dar a tiempo y espacio a Push para correr y hacer su disparo arriba del área. Te cuesta y ya, ahí es donde estamos decepcionados, ¿no? Cuando estar compactos era clave. Pero mira, estamos en una posición en la tabla que controlamos el destino. Jugamos Minnesota, que es el equipo enfrente de nosotros en la tabla por los puntos, y el que gana el próximo partido está más arriba. Y cada partido es un final en este momento para todos los equipos. Es muy apretado y tenemos que mover para frente muy rápido, tener una memoria muy corta y creer y tener fe y responder ahora contra Minnesota.
We'll take a second Spanish question from Paula Marie.
Muy buenas noches. Max. Bájale el volumen. Muy buenas noches. ¿Cómo fue el proceso de prepararse para los 3 encuentros, no más que todo que vienen esta semana? Quiero saber cómo ha sido para cambiar el juego de estilo, ¿no? Para los 2 juegos pasados. Esta semana fue un poco apretada para ustedes, 2 juegos. Ahorita viene Minnesota. ¿Qué cambios estarán presentes para el sábado? ¿Y qué opina de la resiliencia del equipo esta noche? Muy buenas noches, gracias.
No, mira, vamos día a día, vamos a ver cómo recuperaron los chicos. No tuvimos lesionados adicionales. Vamos a recuperar mañana y tener un entreno con los que necesitan más minutos. Y después es no perder tiempo y enfocar ya mañana es en un enfoque en Minnesota. Y dependemos en todos. No sabemos si vamos a hacer rotaciones o no. Tenemos jugadores físicamente muy bien, mentalmente muy bien. O sea que vamos a analizar eso, pero vamos día a día. Para mí es importante cuando planificamos por cada partido, no miramos mucho en el horizonte porque se te puede sacar la concentración en lo que queda enfrente de ti. O sea que vamos día a día, paso a paso, y analizamos el grupo mañana para responder.
We'll now take questions in English, starting with Alex Morgan.
Hey, Luchi, thanks for joining us tonight. I want to ask about the midfield battle tonight. How you guys were approaching Ricky Pooch. Obviously, at times the Galaxy had a lot of success, especially early in the second half, finding space in between the lines. That 40-yard run that Ricky was able to make before he scored his goal was a low moment. And then there were also, a 20-minute period in the first half where it felt like the Quakes were able to find space in the midfield and able to make combos through the middle. So I'm kind of playing out over the course of the game, and what adjustments you were making in the middle of the game to try to win it.
Yeah, look, we recognize Puj's talent and his ability to break lines on the dribble and combination. We believe making him come lower for the ball is doing the right job, because you keep making compactness difficult for him to find the ball up the field. I thought first half, we did it after conceding, we did it better. to build pressure. We were compact. We forced plays inside to out, forced them to try to play outside, inside, and if they did collapse and try to back press and win the offensive transition. So overall, pretty satisfied with the adjustments of the guys. First half, we spoke about even having more compactness to get pressure on their center backs and any mids dropping low and then forcing it outside. And the goal they scored, the tying goal and the 2-2s. That's, I was saying in Spanish, there's a 10-minute moment at the start of the second half that we're really disappointed when we watched the video, because we weren't as compact, we weren't as together, and then it created that space between lines that Puig took advantage of and drove the ball forward and scored a finish when he has time and space. So those are 10 minutes we wish we could take back, because the game turned around in that moment. I thought we were unfortunate not to make it 3-1 before the half. We wanted to continue to be dangerous. Second half, we pushed. We didn't give up. So we're a group that doesn't give up. We're going to keep trying to respond. But we're disappointed with the 10 minutes that didn't that turned the game around. And so apologies to our fans for this is the derby. This is the one that we hate to lose. We take this very personal. So it did happen. It didn't happen. We gotta have a short memory, move forward quickly. Look at the table. Minnesota's right there with us in points. Whoever wins this next game will go over the other, and that's how close it is right now, and how tight the race is. And we control our destiny. We worked hard together this whole season to be in this position, to fight for a playoff spot. That doesn't change. It's about staying together, learning from the last experience, and trying to get better. And we have the opportunity to do that against Minnesota at home, and we got to move forward quickly tomorrow.
Take the next question from Michael Roberson.
All right, Luchi, did you think that it was going to be your night when you guys got the own goal to tie it up, and then Ibobasi scores a couple of minutes later, and it looked like it's going to be your night, and then you lose on a penalty kick? So how disappointing was that to have that type of tales of two halves?
Yeah, look, I don't think the center ref did a great job. I thought he was very inconsistent. I thought he called a lot of little calls for them and didn't call a lot of little calls for us, little handballs, little fouls, little, not advantages. And so that, that plays into the game. But at the end of the day, we have to respond to that adversity and not make excuses. We're not victims of anything. We work on our mentality. We talk about it. And look, I believed from minute 1 to minute 98, 97, because that we one of our biggest values is believing. We believe. So, I thought we pushed the game at the end. We put crosses in the box. Unlucky not to get on the end of one of those. The score was offside. So, guys that came in the game pushed offensively for us. Good to see that. But, we believe till the end, no matter what, and we're going to believe in the next moment. Tomorrow's regen, tomorrow's training. We're going to believe, and we're going to believe in our approach against Minnesota. But the game is tough because I thought we had 75 of the 90 minutes doing really positive things, but the game, you get punished in those small moments, in those key moments, whether it's 15 minutes or 75 minutes.
Take the next question from Jamon Moore.
Hey, Luchi. Obviously, a disappointing result tonight, but since we won't get to talk to you before Minnesota, looking ahead, one of the things that appeared to me tonight was Nico Chakiris brought a bit of energy. It was maybe his best performance in some time for this team, and he's a young. We understand they're down, but anything that you were looking for from Nico tonight in any sort of way that gives you some hope for his performances coming down the stretch here. Thank you.
Yeah, we know we can count on Nico coming in and give us a spark, driving the game forward in the dribble and combination. Wants the ball. He has personality when he plays. He's competitive. So yeah, he definitely generated just good ball rotations, good bypasses wide for crosses, and driving towards the box to create set up combinations and slipping some balls in the channel. So he's a really young player, and he's got a really high ceiling. So proud of him to keep developing, growing, coming back from that injury early in the season, which was really tough. making a U20 roster, being in our competition, our team. He's an important player for us, and he's got the big future ahead of him.
We'll take a final question from Robert Jonas. All right, we'll take a final question from Marco Ukalovic.
Hi, Luchi. I know you were being diplomatic earlier about the officiating, but I got to say it was downright atrocious. And what I want to know is how were you able to keep your composure and your team's composure through all those subsequent bad calls in that second half?
Yeah, look, it's part of the game. Refs are human beings. We're all human beings, and we're not perfect. I'm sure Lucas's effort, was to do his best. So, but there's little details and that for me could have been better, just to keep the game more neutral. But again, we have to stay focused on what we control, which is our mentality, our response, our energy in the next moment, staying present, and that's what we have to do. No excuses here. This happens at every level and every league in the world. But we're not. That's it. It's done. Let's focus on ourselves and what we control to be better.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will be back with an Earthquakes player shortly.
All right. Well, a lot there from Luchi, including a very rare moment of calling out the center ref for his performance on the night, which we'll see if that leads to any sort of action from the league, as tends to happen.
Second time.
Well,
You had
the
actually,
second time, though, he was saying he's human. He makes
right. Walking back.
Yeah, right.
But you had mentioned earlier, Jamon, it's interesting that happened because you had brought up Matias Almeida and kind of the way things function there. And there was a little bit of that, with some of the comments that we heard from Luchi. It's very rare for us to kind of hear him make that, what I think is probably a mistake on his part, to be criticizing the referees. But he did talk a lot about the team's response to Riqui Puig. I think, Alex, you actually asked the question in regard to the midfield. So I'm curious about what you thought about his response. He talked about the compactness. It sounded more like a response to the player, kind of like as a fact of like chasing the game rather than being positioned in the moment. So I'm kind of interested to hear what your thoughts are in regards to what he said about the midfield's performance and the response to Riqui Puig.
He seemed to think the problem was more isolated to that 10-minute period at the start of the second half. I don't think it was just that 10-minute period. I think that 10-minute period was particularly bad, but I think the entire second half, really, in large chunks of the first half, they weren't capable of defending Riqui Puig in the way that they needed to be. And I think that issue is who you have in that number 10 position doing that legwork. Because Jack Skane is a guy who has an incredible motor, who can press the heck out of opponents and keep on them. And Jamir Montero is good at winning the ball in transition. He likes to find his pockets to win it, but he's more of an opportunist in the way that he presses. He'll pop up in this position, he'll pop up in that position, and he'll win the ball. But he's not good for a game like this, where I think they really should have considered man-marking Riqui Puig in that midfield role, because he was dropping into the center right from the beginning of the game. Literally the first 5 minutes, the Quakes couldn't win the ball because Riqui Puig had the ball in that defensive line and was able to quarterback the game from there. And I don't think the Quakes had the right approach to manage it with Jamir Montero and Jeremy Abobasi, in that kind of 2-4 defensive role.
So speaking of approach, one thing that I found kind of interesting that Luchi mentioned is that he said that they were very close to making this a 3-1 game right before the end of the first half. And
Sure.
I think one thing that he did that I think a lot of people might find fault with is he continued to press the issue against the Galaxy rather than taking a more conservative approach to the match. I'm wondering kind of what you think about that, Jamon. Do you think that Luchi's approach here was at fault, or do you think that he had the right approach and it was just a matter of the players and the way that they performed on the pitch?
I think he indicated that there were situations where the players didn't perform, to what the game plan expected of them. There were times where there was nobody on Riqui Puig. There were times there were 5 players on Riqui Puig. Neither one of those is a good situation. And so it's important that you understand, okay, if he's going to receive, I talked about how can we get him to receive the ball in a way that it's not going to be dangerous? And we had a particular game plan for how we wanted him to be able to receive the ball. Okay, but when that does not happen, when he receives it too high, when he receives it too deep, you need to understand, okay, who's going to be there, whether it's a man mark or whether it's going to be a combination, or, you know, it's going to be, you know, the old, you know, method of you know, shadow cover balance and things like that. So look, you have to understand exactly what the situation calls for. And the Quakes were very, at least, inconsistent in how they reacted in some of those defensive situations.
Well, because in the first half, they were doing okay when they were just bunkering and closing down the space in the midfield and making it tight. They were doing good, I think, when they were pushing the tempo a little bit more. Second half, I don't know what they were doing because they weren't pressing at all. And then there was so much space in between lines that Ricky Pooch just had to.
That's the 10 minutes where the game kind of got out of hand. And you know, the penalty happened, but frankly, you know, there were two players that basically committed a penalty there. So, you know, that was going to get called no matter what. You know, the question is, you know, I was kind of surprised Luchi didn't talk about the situation where Bobasi went down on the edge of the box and there was no call there. Although I didn't think it was a real good penalty shout. But, you know, if you're going to go like, hey, you know, the referee did a poor job tonight, you know, that's a situation where you're calling it over here. You know, do you call it over there? 5 yellow cards. We looked at the stats, you know, for tonight, 5 yellow cards against the Quakes. 2 against the Galaxy, more fouls against the Quakes, I think 13 or so, than the Galaxy, I think it was 8. So, you know, when you're playing a home game in MLS, you kind of want to get like the home call. And it definitely felt like tonight they weren't getting the home call.
And the interesting thing is the LA support was not as it normally is either.
I'm not the guy who points at referees.
Right.
I'm the guy who says, oh, we got to overcome referees. We're going to talk to Tommy Townsend.
With a question from Ivan.
Good night, Tommy Thompson. I know this was a difficult game, and you've played in many Cali Clasico over your time with the club. How did this one feel in a rare occasion to play in front of the fans at PayPal Park as opposed to Stanford?
Yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, it hurts to lose to the Galaxy under any circumstance, but to lose to them at home just makes it even worse. It was a difficult feeling when that final whistle blew. I thought we were putting the heat on them. I thought we had a couple good chances at the end there, but disappointed to drop 3 points at home, especially to LA of all teams.
Next, we'll go to Robert Jonas.
Thank you. Tommy, you've been through a lot of stretch runs. This is a team that does currently sit above the playoff line, but games are running out, and performances like tonight may not be enough to keep you there. With a game against Minnesota coming up in a couple of days, what are the players, what's the coaching staff need to do to reestablish that home dominance that at times was missing tonight?
Yeah, I mean, we got to just get back to how we were playing before the break. I think we've shown what we can do in this league, and throughout the season we've shown that we're very strong at home. So we need to have a quick memory. Tonight's performance wasn't what we were hoping for, but the good news for us and what we're excited about is that we have a great opportunity on Saturday against a team that's just I believe right above us in the standings. So it's a huge opportunity. And so we're gonna focus on that. This team is talented, and tonight just we didn't show our potential. But I'm confident. We've been able to respond all year to adversity, so I'm confident this group will get it done on Saturday.
Next, we'll go to Alex Morgan.
Hi, Tommy. Thanks for joining us tonight. Can you talk about the 10-minute period at the beginning of the second half? Luchi expressed his disappointment in the way the team played in that period. And I'm curious, going into halftime where you guys could have been up 3-1, had, a lot of the momentum, what the conversation was, what you guys were trying to do at the beginning of the second half, and from your vantage point, some of the things you were seeing that, why you thought that might have broke down.
Yeah, it was a back and forth game. I thought LA started the game very well, but then we we turned the game around. We responded in an excellent way to end the first half, and that gave us a lot of momentum. I mean, the guys were feeling good at halftime, but we knew, LA is fighting for their lives right now at the bottom of the standings. So we knew they were going to come out ready to go. And unfortunately, one of their big time guys made a big time play, and that hurts because we want to keep the momentum that we had in the first half to continue and accelerate, to accelerate in the second half, but it just didn't come off for us. So we got to watch the tape. We got to correct things and make sure that we don't give guys like that time on the ball, because it's a good team. They'll hurt you.
We'll close with the final question from Marco Ukalovic.
Hey, Tommy, obviously it was a disappointing result, especially after you guys get the momentum late in the first half with those 2 goals. But, can you just talk about, your play in that final 10 minutes when you come in as a sub in the 84th minute? Do you feel like you brought some energy right then to the team in those final 10 minutes there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this group has depth, and we showed that with the guys that came on. It's a long season, and multiple guys have stepped up in positions that we need to fill when other guys weren't able to be there. So I think that's a strength of this group that's gonna help moving forward, because we're gonna need everybody over the next 8 games. We're entering now the playoff push, and to have fresh legs to be able to come off the bench is important, and this team has that. I believe that's what I bring to this team as well, whether I'm starting or subbing in. I'm ready to bring energy, and I'm ready to try to make an impact, whether that's to hold a result for us or to push a result like tonight. I thought we had some great opportunities at the end. Unfortunately, it didn't go our way, but like I said at the beginning of the interview, I'm already looking forward to being back at home on Saturday. It's a huge game for us, and this locker room will be ready to respond, just like we've shown all throughout the course of the year.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes tonight's post-game press conference.
All right. A lot of positivity there from Tommy at the very end of the press conference. I mean, having to answer some difficult questions, obviously. Robert, you got to kind of lead off there from the team. I'm curious as to what you think about how Tommy responded to tonight's match.
He said everything he needed to say. I mean, absolutely. You just have to kind of turn the page. I think he described it as having a quick memory, short memory, whatever you want to call it. That's exactly what needs to happen. To capture that spirit and that energy they had in the first half of the season we need, he said it, and I think we need to see it too. They have to show that. I mean, I think the one thing I heard him say that I think was very sort of encapsulates tonight's performance, LA was fighting for their lives tonight, and the Quakes did not respond at a high enough level to prevent LA from walking away with 3 points. They had shots, they had opportunities when Tommy was in the game in the last 10 minutes. Obviously, the Galaxy is just packing back and looking to see the game out. But it should never have really gotten to that point. A team that's that far down in the standings, if they're going to be fighting, then you need to be fighting even harder. And you're at home. And so while he might have had a positive end, I'm actually feeling a little less positive, and I want to see this team respond on Saturday in a way that shows that they can be hungry too.
One of the things that I found interesting, and you just echoed it right now, was when he was talking about LA fighting for their lives. I mean, one thing, and Jamon, you had mentioned this earlier in the season, the teams go in playing teams that respond to what's happening during the match. They're not playing teams that are just out there as NPCs. They don't just run around mindless, right? They're responding. LA went into the locker room at halftime, and they came back with the game plan, and they executed. So, Alex, it looked like you were about to say something here before I cut you off.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for who's going to step up in the back half of the season, where the Quakes need leadership in this team, who at halftime could have been stepping up. I'm looking at the back line. I'm looking at the defense, because you look at these last few performances that the Quakes have had defensively, not good enough. The beginning of the year, their defense was their strong point. They were winning 1-goal games. They were narrowly beating teams, and they were keeping lots of clean sheets. Now Daniel has to make 3-4 key saves just to keep them in the game, and they're still allowing 2 to 3 goals per game. The issue is the back line right now, and we haven't really talked about that yet. And I'm surprised it's kind of avoided our focus tonight because
let's get to it because
Jonathan
Mensah tonight
was in the starting lineup after 15 minutes, tried to rugby tackle Joveljic, and the Quakes allowed a goal. And I don't think that Jonathan Mensah, did enough to warrant the starting spot again at the weekend.
And if not for Miguel Trauco saving him, he would have been at fault for another penalty, because my recollection is the last time he started, he was at fault for a penalty in that game and the game before that too. That would have been his third penalty that he would have conceded this season. So these calls for Jonathan Mensah over Tanner Beeson, I just have to say that I just don't see it. I don't think like it's so much better that, it's warranted the reaction to Beeson starting. And I think tonight is another reminder of why Tanner Beeson right now is honestly as good as Jonathan Mensah is on the pitch. Now, maybe that's his age, right? Maybe that's a new environment. Maybe him and Rodriguez are not a perfect pairing that we had hoped they would be, or maybe they thought they would be at the beginning of the season, but it's not working right now with Jonathan Mensah. When it works, it's because he gets put as the third in a 3-man back line, and that I can get down with. But I'm actually kind of, in the camp of go back to Tanner Beeson right now.
No, and you hadn't even.
At least he's not going to give up a penalty. He may let a couple players run past him,
right?
But at least he's not going to give up a penalty. And last I checked, pretty much just about that you can give up in the world is a penalty.
Yeah,
let's not give up a penalty because that's what caused a loss tonight rather than escaping with a point.
Right, but there was also the one-on-one with Tyler Boyd in which he scored the goal too.
Well,
so
of course, I'm going to give him a little benefit.
Well, it was a lower opportunity.
There was some slippage.
Yeah,
going on over there.
Oh,
but you could also say, well, he got
a
beat.
little bit.
Look, no, I'm just saying, like,
no,
tonight. It was slick over here. It was slick over there. Multiple players slipping. But at the same time, if he's got the right position there, it doesn't matter.
I think big picture here, this is just making me think, look, winter transfer window, the Quakes need to evaluate Nathan. If Nathan, they think he can claim that starting spot and re-sign him. If they don't, let Nathan off the books. Jonathan Mensah, let Jonathan Mensah off the books. Then you have Rodriguez and Tanner Beeson, who realistically are these two long-term center backs for this team. Then you get a solid third center back. Get a player like that you thought Jonathan Mensah would be at the beginning of the season. They need another center back in there. I wasn't convinced of that at the beginning of the year. I wasn't convinced of that for most of the summer because I thought Jonathan Mensah can return to the way he was playing at the beginning of the season. I don't think that anymore. I think that Jonathan Mensah at this point has shown that he's not ready to step back up to be the leader that we thought he could be in this team. And I don't want to bank on it for next year.
Okay, I agree with that. I want to ask Robert one question before we move on, though, because he and I were chatting a little bit about this. But tonight may be the worst performance from the two fullbacks, whoever the starting two fullbacks were, of any game this season. Usually we can come on to any show at the end and go like, yeah, this didn't work well. This was a problem after any loss. But hey, man, at least the outside backs played well, right? And they bailed out the Quakes a few times this season as well. Tonight, they were a weak point, I thought, Robert. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the regular contributions you see from Acapo and Trauco, especially in midfield and even into the offensive third, just weren't consistent enough tonight. Something I think the Galaxy was very prepared for, which I don't think allowed them to shine in any significant way whatsoever. And so locked back in a more defensive formation. They were in some cases playing triage back there. I mean, it was a back line that has played together and can play together. They clearly trained together, but there wasn't as much comfortableness. You saw the Galaxy get wide players very open, especially on the break. And whether it be Trauco on one side or Capo on the other side, struggling to fill that space and not allow that player to uncontestedly dribble toward the box or just feel like they were in enough control late in the game to go to the corner. We just didn't see that from our outside backs tonight.
All right, I think that can give us a chance to move to the last segment of the show, which is our closing thoughts. So, Alex Morgan, I'm going to go to you first. Your closing thoughts after the 3-2 loss against the LA Galaxy.
I'm not worried about the Quakes' playoff chances this season, but I think that this was a really tough loss for the fans to swallow. the third game against the Galaxy this season, third time they failed to get a win. That is disappointing. I'm glad that Luchi Gonzalez apologized to the fans in the post-game press conference for that. I appreciate that. I think that sometimes he has a tendency to be optimistic about the way that this team is playing. And I think that his honesty tonight was valuable, because the Quakes have another game in just a few days' time from now, and they're going to need to rebound quickly for that. You gotta hope that Jack Skane is going to be available soon. I think you guys said you had an update on that I'm not sure that you ever shared. So I want to leave it with that, because to me that's an important place looking forward.
Yeah, with Scan, we know that he suffered a foot injury. I think it was commented as an ankle.
They said he rolled an ankle in practice.
You know, he was here at the stadium tonight. He did have a walking boot on, which, you know, may or may not be something you would want to wear precautionarily if your ankle's rolled. But, you know, like, we don't know when he's back. You know, he would. I sort of commented on it, and he didn't have really a response about what that meant. But, you know, that's something that, to your point, Alex, you know, a little bit concerning that you may not have a player like Jack to rely on when you need that little bit of push.
That's the most concerning news I've heard all night.
Yeah. And actually, it leads to my final thought, which is, you know, that, you know, I'm becoming less and less convinced with these two losses against Kansas City, where they were just dominated. And even, you know, let's say very fortunate to get a win in Vancouver, which is, you know, looks really good to get those 3 points given the circumstances. And then coming home and losing to LA, you know, both LA and Kansas City, teams that are outside of the playoff line, but are looking at that, you know, opportunity. What's the team they're going to pip to get in there? And they may be thinking it's San Jose that's the team that they can drop down into 10th and take that final spot. I don't think the season gets any easier for this team. And to assume that they're going to walk away with a couple of victories, 3 victories and a couple draws, whatever it's going to take to sneak in as a 9th place team, I don't think that's a given anymore. And I think that's something that should be concerning, that a team with this much talent, a team that is definitely a team that is worthy with its roster of making the playoffs, is in a position where they're going to have to earn it. They're going to really have to fight to get it.
All right, Jamon Moore.
Yeah, so first off, I'm very excited to have gotten to be here at the stadium, despite the result, to be able to be with the crew. I think for the first time, all 4 of us have been together this season, or at least been able to do a post-game aftershock together, and along with having an A here, and of course our photographer as well. So the full crew together here, kind of for the first time. Sarah Leyva, by the way, yes. So, you know, it's that was, you know, exciting, and it's always good. And I got to meet a couple of people tonight, or see people I hadn't seen in a long time. The result, obviously, extremely disappointing. After coming back from Leagues Cup and going on the road in a couple of games where they looked really rough, which is not altogether surprising, you know, given the way that the Quakes have played on the road this year. You wanted to see them come out tonight with a real spark in front of the home fans, and to be able to put a statement on the game. And the opposite was true. Whoever was talking about the Galaxy being hungry, the Galaxy came out and just dominated those first, you know, 20 minutes or so of the game. And that was what was disappointing probably the most to me, was how much more the Galaxy seemed to want it. And frankly, in all 3 games this year, to some extent, seemed to want it in each of those situations. I don't question the heart of the team, but that is extremely disappointing. Now they're going to have to pick themselves up and play at Minnesota United. Now some news, their star striker, you know, Bungie has been injured, did not play tonight in a 3-0 home win against Colorado, although be concerned because they scored 3 goals without him. Manuel Reynoso has looked pretty good, you know, is the driving force behind this team in general, and is the player who's going to feed. He's that central creative playmaker for Minnesota United that Ricky Puig is LA Galaxy. So you have to figure out how to contain these central playmakers, and you've got to figure it out fast. That's the number one thing. You shut down Reynoso, you shut down the lines of you know, the attack, being able to get the ball in to whomever the striker is. For sure, if Bungi's able to play, you know, that, you know, we know he's super dangerous, right? So that's going to be important to how the Quakes, I think, approach this game. They need to take the lessons learned from tonight, and they're going to have to bring a much better effort, because you know who's going to be hungry this weekend. It's going to be Minnesota United.
Yeah. So one of the most concerning things for me with this match, aside from the fact that they're playing a Cali Clasico and once again did not get the desired result, was the way in which the team responded to really high possession from the opposing team. I think that the Quakes had some really big lapses in this match, and the way that they responded to it, I think, is similar to what we've seen throughout the season. And I don't think that's something that's been addressed. And it's very concerning that it's this far into the season and they still haven't fixed that. I don't think it's sustainable to continue to play your opponent with them being on the front foot so often in the match, and you see what happens. They carry that confidence into other parts of the match. So in the first half, yes, the Quakes did go into the locker room happy, thinking that they could have had a 3-1 lead, but they come back out in the second half and the Galaxy were ready to go, and the Quakes were unable to respond to that amount of pressure from LA. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping, if that happens in the match against Minnesota United, that the Quakes are able to respond to, because those moments of high possession from the opposing team, as it turns out for this Quake squad, is very problematic. So with that, I'd like to invite everybody to visit quakesepicenter.com, where you can find our articles, the salary spreadsheet, and our shop, where you can support us. You can also find the Patreon on there. For just $2 a month, you can get access to our articles. For $5 a month, you can also get access to the Quakes Epicenter Slack. So you can join us during the match or during the week to talk about the San Jose Earthquakes, upcoming games, and player performances and all other. Make sure you follow us threads as well. So if anybody's even on there right now, I don't know. But I want to thank you all for joining us
Maybe we
tonight.
need a blue sky as well.
Yeah, maybe. I have no idea. Wait, can you actually get the you need a special access?
Why do you need that when you have the Quakes Epicenter patron Slack?
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Very good point. Very good. My bad.
So anyway, it was really great being here with you all tonight. I had a lot of fun, and thank you all for joining us tonight for another Aftershock. We'll see you next time.